Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez strode onto the Newsmax stage, draped in a designer ensemble that cost more than the monthly rent for a typical American family, appearing fully prepared to lecture a self-made billionaire on the intricacies of economic disparity. Trump cast a sidelining glance at the former bartender-turned-congresswoman, a woman who had never personally signed the front of a paycheck in her entire professional life, and offered a knowing smirk. He had spent decades constructing a global empire that provided livelihoods for over 22,000 employees across various sectors. Meanwhile, she had successfully campaigned to drive 25,000 high-paying Amazon jobs right out of New York City, bizarrely characterizing the massive loss as a progressive triumph. The atmosphere suggested that the evening was destined to be quite a spectacle for the cameras. Newsmax had heavily promoted the event as the ultimate showdown between capitalism and socialism, billing it as the fundamental debate that the American public desperately needed to witness. It was a direct ideological confrontation between Donald Trump, the living symbol of American free market success, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the provocative new face of democratic socialism. The network executives were well aware that this pairing represented absolute ratings gold for their platform. It was the billionaire developer facing off against the young rising star of the progressive movement. The man who had physically reshaped the Manhattan skyline was standing across from the woman who erroneously believed that tax incentives were piles of cash just waiting to be spent on government projects. AOC had only agreed to the confrontation because she harbored an inflated sense of confidence in her social media prowess. She genuinely believed her quick-witted retorts, which were refined in the echo chambers of Twitter, and her popularity with younger voters would serve as an impenetrable shield. For 3 years, she had been the undisputed darling of the progressive media machine, constantly celebrated for her sassy clapbacks and short viral video clips. She assumed she could simply deploy the same superficial tactics that had garnered likes on Instagram to defeat Trump in a structured debate environment. She walked in with a set of rehearsed talking points focused on corporate greed, the exploitation of the working class, and what she called the moral imperative for a socialist transition. She was completely oblivious to the level of preparation Trump and his team had undertaken behind the scenes. For 2 consecutive weeks, Trump had been consulting with top-tier economists, prominent business leaders, seasoned executives from his own organizations, and dedicated researchers to build a bulletproof case against the socialist ideology. This was not merely an exercise in personal attacks or political mudslinging. It was a calculated defense of the capitalist system, backed by empirical evidence designed to resonate with ordinary citizens who were exhausted by being lectured about inequality by people who had never built a single business. His team had painstakingly compiled a comprehensive archive of every relevant document. They had secured the complete documentation of the Amazon HQ2 proposal, including precise job numbers, specific salary tiers, and projected long-term economic benefits for the region. They possessed detailed cost-benefit analyses of the Green New Deal from multiple independent economic think tanks, all of which pointed to the same astronomical price tag. They had gathered harrowing video footage from Venezuela that showed citizens scouring through piles of trash for food and empty grocery store shelves, a direct consequence of the socialist policies AOC had previously lauded. They also held financial records that painted a picture of a rather luxurious lifestyle for a self-proclaimed socialist. There were documents regarding her high-end Navy Yard apartment lease, social media snapshots of her wearing luxury designer brands, and photos from her high-profile appearance at the Met Gala. They had tracked her own social media statements and tweets about economics that fundamentally contradicted basic financial principles. Furthermore, they had her actual congressional records, which highlighted a total lack of legislative achievements despite 3 years of constant national media coverage. Trump had also prepared something far more visceral than theoretical policy arguments, which was his actual, tangible track record of success. Instead of debating the abstract theories of capitalism, he intended to showcase the physical results of his career. He had high-resolution photos of the massive skyscrapers and developments he had personally brought to fruition. He held employment records, verifying the 22,000 individuals who relied on his various enterprises for their income. There were tax documents showing the billions of dollars he had contributed to the government coffers over the span of several decades. He had folders full of contracts with suppliers and small businesses, demonstrating the massive economic ripples generated by his projects. He possessed before and after photography of dilapidated Manhattan properties he had transformed into world-class assets, alongside testimonials from employees who had built entire careers within his companies. The contrast was clearly going to be devastating for his opponent. It was a man who had actually constructed tangible value under a capitalist framework, versus a woman who had actively dismantled job opportunities while preaching socialism. It was a veteran who understood the nuances of business through lived experience versus someone with an academic degree she clearly failed to grasp. One participant had created immense wealth and opportunity, while the other had only ever drawn a taxpayer-funded salary while attacking the very concept of wealth creation. It was the builder standing across from the bartender. It was the harshness of reality confronting the curated world of Instagram. Capitalism was finally meeting socialism head-on, and every single piece of evidence was meticulously organized into color-coded folders. All of this information was queued up for display on the massive high-definition screens that Newsmax had installed throughout their studio. The entire presentation was engineered to prove a singular, undeniable point. Socialism is a hollow fairy tale that inevitably leads to failure, and the individuals promoting it possess zero understanding of basic economic reality or how the world actually functions. The events that were about to unfold over the next 90 minutes would force a self-styled economics expert to explain her fundamental misunderstanding of unemployment statistics. She would be pressed on why she intentionally killed 25,000 high-paying jobs and then had the audacity to celebrate it. Finally, she would have to answer for why every nation that adopted her preferred ideology ended up with a starving population. If the audience wanted to see the result of a job creator dismantling a job destroyer, they were in for a wild ride. The turning point would come at the 28-minute mark when Trump would reveal the photos from her lavish Met Gala appearance. The expression on her face at that moment would be absolutely priceless. The Newsmax studio in New York City was filled to capacity with 500 spectators, making it the largest live audience the network had ever hosted for a single program. The crowd was predominantly pro-Trump, with red MAGA hats visible in almost every row. A small but vocal pocket of young AOC supporters sat huddled in the corner, clad in Green New Deal shirts and looking noticeably anxious in what was clearly hostile territory. The energy in the room was electric and aggressive, with the stage design specifically curated for high-stakes combat. Two podiums were positioned at sharp angles to face each other directly, flanked by massive digital displays ready to broadcast evidence. Greg Kelly sat at the moderator's desk, appearing as though he knew he was about to oversee either the most historic debate or the most absolute destruction in the history of cable news. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez entered the stage first, to a mixture of cheers from her loyal corner and a deafening chorus of boos from the rest of the room. At 34 years old, she was dressed in a designer outfit that fashion experts would later value at approximately $300–400. This was a specific detail that Trump's research team had already verified and prepared to use against her. She carried herself with the immense self-assurance of a social media influencer whose every post garnered hundreds of thousands of interactions. She appeared to have her rehearsed talking points regarding the alleged evils of the capitalist system fully memorized and ready for delivery. She genuinely believed that her youth and digital savvy would make her appear modern and forward-thinking in comparison to the former president. She was about to receive a harsh lesson on why social media engagement does not equate to a functional understanding of global economics. Donald Trump made his entrance 2 minutes later, greeted by a roar of applause so loud that it literally shook the foundations of the building. The standing ovation lasted for over 3 minutes, with the crowd chanting his name in a rhythmic thunder. Slogans like USA and Build the Wall echoed through the rafters, forcing Greg Kelly to repeatedly ask for order so the program could begin. Trump was dressed in his trademark dark suit and signature red tie, waving to his supporters with his characteristic gestures. He walked to his podium carrying several thick, heavy folders, which he placed down with a deliberate thud that was clearly picked up by the microphones. AOC's confident smile faltered for just a split second. She knew that Trump arriving with prepared physical evidence was never a positive sign for any of his political adversaries. Greg Kelly opened the session with the standard administrative language about maintaining a respectful dialogue and focusing on the substance of the issues. This introductory formality lasted only about 40 seconds before the moderator turned the floor over to the Congresswoman. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, the floor is yours for your opening statement, Kelly announced. She launched into her prepared remarks, using that distinctive, dramatic tone that had become famous through her viral video clips. "Thank you, Greg," she began, staring directly into the lens. "Capitalism is a fundamentally broken system that exploits the labor of workers and concentrates obscene wealth in the hands of billionaires like the man standing across from me. It is a system that purposefully leaves working-class families behind, while the elite thrive. We are here to advocate for democratic socialism, a system where health care, education, housing, and dignity are treated as basic human rights rather than commodities. We need a society where billionaires are forced to pay their fair share, and where the needs of workers are prioritized over corporate profits." She turned her gaze toward Trump, attempting to project practiced confidence. "Mr. Trump is the personification of everything that is wrong with the American capitalist experiment," she continued. "He represents greed, systemic inequality, and the exploitation of the many for the benefit of the few. He has amassed billions while ordinary people struggle to put food on the table. He is the problem, not the solution to our national challenges." Her supporters in the corner cheered wildly as she finished her statement. She sat back in her chair, clearly believing that she had landed a significant blow right out of the gate. Trump simply watched her with an expression that sat somewhere between amusement and genuine pity. When he finally began to speak, his queen's accent was heavy with a layer of biting sarcasm. "Alexandria, should I call you by your full name, or do you still prefer the name Sandy?" he asked, prompting a wave of laughter from the audience. AOC visibly bristled at the mention of her childhood nickname, her posture stiffening immediately. "Let's get right into the heart of the matter, which is jobs," Trump continued, ignoring her reaction. "I'm talking about real, high-quality jobs, the kind of thing you have never actually created but have proven quite adept at destroying. Let's start the conversation with the Amazon situation." He reached for his first folder before she even had a chance to formulate a response. When a former bartender tries to lecture a billionaire developer about job creation, it's always a good idea to bring the receipts for the jobs she personally killed, he quipped. Trump didn't wait for Kelly's permission to move forward. He was already signaling his team to project the first set of documents onto the massive screens behind them. Amazon was ready to build their second massive headquarters right in the heart of New York City, he reminded the audience. That was in your district, in Queens, if I recall correctly. Do you even remember the details of that deal? AOC tried to jump in and regain control of the narrative by claiming that Amazon only wanted to exploit the local community. I'm going to have to stop you right there, Trump interrupted, his voice booming over hers. Let's look at the actual facts of the matter, not the socialist theories you learned in a classroom. The screen displayed the official Amazon HQ2 proposal for New York City. The numbers were clear: 25,000 guaranteed jobs with an average annual salary of $150,000. It represented a total private investment of $2.5 billion and a projected economic impact of $27 billion over the first decade. The tax incentives were valued at $3 billion over that same 10-year period. Look at those numbers, Trump said, pointing at the screen. 25,000 high-paying technology jobs with salaries that would change the lives of working families. Do you have any idea how many people in this country would love to earn $150,000 a year? He turned his attention to the audience. Raise your hand if you'd like a job paying $150,000 a year right now, he shouted. Hundreds of hands went up instantly, followed by a wave of laughter and applause. But you were the one who led the charge to chase them away, Trump continued, turning back to his opponent. You spearheaded the opposition, and you single-handedly killed the largest economic development deal in the history of your city. 25,000 jobs are gone because of you. Why would you do that? AOC attempted to lean back on her rehearsed talking points about corporate welfare and how that tax money could have been spent elsewhere. Stop right there! Trump's voice thundered through the studio, silencing her immediately. That single sentence is the absolute proof that you don't understand the first thing about economics, despite that very expensive degree you hold. He walked toward the center of the stage, appearing more animated and energized. Tax incentives are not a pile of cash that the government has sitting in a vault, Alexandria. They are simply money that the government agrees not to collect from a company that hasn't arrived yet. Do you actually understand the difference between spending money and not collecting it? AOC looked visibly flustered as she tried to repeat that the $3 billion could have been used for social programs. Without Amazon coming to New York, you get exactly $0, Trump countered. You don't have $3 billion to spend on anything because the company isn't there to pay any taxes at all. You got absolutely nothing. Trump then pulled out a comically oversized calculator, which drew another round of laughter from the spectators. Let me do the simple math for you since you seem to be struggling, he said. We have a $27 billion positive economic impact over 10 years. Then we subtract the $3 billion in tax incentives that would have been spread out over that same decade. What is $27 billion minus $3 billion? He punched the buttons on the giant calculator dramatically. The answer is $24 billion in pure profit for the city of New York. But because of your interference, the city got zero. You turned a $24 billion gain into a total loss of nothingness. The audience erupted into a standing ovation. But Trump was far from finished with the topic. And do you know what the worst part is? He asked. When Amazon finally announced they were leaving, you actually celebrated it. You took to social media and called it a massive victory for the people. You cost 25,000 families the chance at a $150,000 a year salary, and you thought it was a reason to party. He signaled the crew to display AOC's own tweet on the screen. Today was the day a group of dedicated everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, the Post read. You didn't defeat greed, Alexandria. You defeated opportunity. You defeated the future of 25,000 workers, and you defeated a $24 billion economic windfall for your own neighbors. Trump then pulled out another document from his folder. You claimed those tax breaks were money that could be spent on schools or subways, he said. You have a degree in economics from Boston University. That institution costs roughly $60,000 a year to attend. Your parents likely spent a total of $250,000 on your higher education. And yet, you don't seem to comprehend the basic difference between a tax incentive and government spending. He turned to the audience with an expression of exaggerated disbelief. This is the person who wants to be in charge of the American economy, folks. This is someone who genuinely believes that a tax break is a bag of cash the government can just go spend. She cost her own constituents 25,000 life-changing jobs and then had the nerve to call it a win. AOC tried to defend her stance by claiming the jobs would have been exploitative. Exploitative? Trump shouted back, his voice rising in volume. They were offering to pay people $150,000 a year to work in high-tech offices. I think almost every person in this room would be more than happy to be exploited at that price point. He pointed his finger directly at her podium. I have spent my entire life creating thousands upon thousands of jobs, building world-class towers, and generating real wealth for this country, he said. What have you actually done? You have killed 25,000 jobs before they even started. You are a job destroyer, not a creator. And you have no business trying to lecture me on how an economy functions. His final line on the subject was delivered with a heavy dose of contempt. You are a former bartender who has no understanding of how a business actually operates, he said. You spent your time mixing drinks, not meeting payroll or managing massive construction projects. You haven't built a single thing in your life. And the one time you had a real opportunity to bring prosperity to your own district, you actively destroyed it. That isn't democratic socialism. That is pure economic illiteracy. You killed those jobs because you don't understand how tax breaks work. If the people at home see the problem here, they should let the world know. Trump then reached for his second folder, which was visibly much thicker than the first one. Now, let's move on to your grand plan, the Green New Deal, he said with a smirk. This is your big vision to save the planet while supposedly transforming our economy. He picked up the oversized calculator again, prompting more laughter from the crowd. This is going to require some very large numbers, so I hope you've brushed up on your arithmetic, he joked. Nothing screams a lack of preparation like a plan that costs more than the entire global GDP. AOC tried to jump back into the conversation by claiming the plan would create millions of green energy jobs. It is going to cost the taxpayers $93 trillion, Trump shouted over her. Do you even have a concept of how much money that actually is? He started punching numbers into the giant calculator with theatrical flair. $90 over the span of 10 years. That comes out to $9.3 trillion every single year. For context, the entire annual GDP of the United States is only about $25 trillion. Your plan would consume more than a third of everything this country produces every year for a decade. He let that figure sink in for a moment before continuing his assault. But let's make it more personal for the people watching at home. Let's talk about what this actually costs an individual American family. He went back to the calculator for more theatrics. If we take $93 trillion and divide it by the 128 years, 28 million households in this country, we get a total of $726,500 per household. He looked out at the audience. Can any of you afford to pay $700 for Alexandria's dream project?" he asked. "I'm a billionaire, and even I think that price tag is a little steep." The audience responded with a mix of laughter and loud applause. Trump had the number projected on the screens in a massive, bold font: $726,562 per household. "Now, Alexandria, I have a very simple question for you," he said. "How exactly do we pay for this?" AOC attempted to use her rehearsed response about progressive taxation and making billionaires pay their fair share. "Let's look at the actual math," Trump interrupted. "If we took every single billionaire in this country, every last one of them, and we seized 100% of their total wealth, everything they own, we would only get about $5 trillion. That still leaves you with an $88 trillion deficit. Where does the rest of that money come from?" AOC began to fumble her words, mentioning corporations and higher earners. "Even if you taxed every person earning over $100,000 at a 100% rate, taking every single penny they earn, you still couldn't pay for this plan," Trump countered. "You would have to tax the middle class and the working class into absolute poverty to even come close. Is that your secret plan for America?" Trump didn't wait for her to answer. He pulled out a document that had been famously deleted from her official website. "Let's talk about what is actually written in your plan, because the details are even more insane than the cost," he said. He displayed the deleted Green New Deal FAQ on the screens, highlighting specific sections for the audience to see. "You wanted to eventually eliminate all air travel," he pointed out. "You wanted to build high-speed trains across the oceans. How do we get to Hawaii in your world, Alexandria? Are we taking a train across the Pacific?" The audience roared with laughter at the absurdity of the proposal. "And then there are the farting cows," Trump continued with obvious glee. "You were actually worried about cow flatulence? That is an official part of your legislative document." He showed the exact quote on the screen for everyone to read. "We aren't sure we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows in 10 years, the document stated. "And here is my personal favorite part of the whole plan," Trump said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You wanted to provide total economic security for anyone who is unable or unwilling to work." "Unwilling?" he repeated, looking at the audience in mock disbelief. "You wanted to use taxpayer money to pay people who simply choose not to work? How is that fair to the hard-working people in this room? How does an economy even function if you pay people to stay home?" Trump began to pace the stage, building his momentum. "You compared this plan to the mobilization for World War II. But that entire war only cost about $4 trillion in today's dollars. Your plan is 23 times more expensive than the effort it took to defeat Hitler and Imperial Japan combined." He turned back to face her directly. "And then you tried to delete this document once people started asking basic questions," he noted. "You put it out there as your big idea, but as soon as people noticed the cow farts and the trains to Hawaii, you got embarrassed and pretended it never existed." AOC tried to defend the document as a mere draft, but Trump wasn't having it. "It was your plan, your signature idea," he said. "And when the world saw how insane it was, you tried to hide. $726,000 per household, no more airplanes, worrying about cows, paying people to not work. This isn't a serious policy proposal, Alexandria. This is the napkin dream of a bartender who's had a few too many drinks. This is what happens when someone who's never managed a business thinks they can redesign the entire global economy." His final assessment of the policy was brutal. The Green New Deal received exactly 0 votes in the United States Senate, he reminded her. 0. Not a single member of your own party would even put their name on it. Your own colleagues looked at this and said it was crazy. And you're still standing here trying to defend it? 700 $26,000 per household for cow farts and ocean trains. Trump moved right into his next planned attack without giving her a moment to recover her footing. You love to talk about taxing the rich, he said. That is your big slogan, your whole brand. Let's take a look at how you actually live. He pulled out a photograph that caused AOC to look visibly uncomfortable. She knew exactly what was about to happen. Wearing a dress that says, "Tax the Rich," to a party that costs $35,000 to attend is like a PETA member wearing a mink coat to an animal shelter, he joked. Trump had the photo projected on every screen in the building. It was the famous shot of AOC at the 2021 Met Gala, wearing a white gown with the slogan emblazoned across the back. "This was you in September of 2021, Trump said. A very nice designer dress, a very bold statement. Tax the rich, right there for everyone to see." He paused for dramatic effect. The ticket price to just walk through the door of that party was $35,000. The audience gasped and then began to boo loudly. $35,000 for a single night out, Trump emphasized. That is more than half of what the average American family earns in an entire year. And you chose that venue to wear your tax the rich dress. He walked around his podium, looking more animated than ever. "Do you honestly not see the irony here?" he asked. "Do you not realize how incredibly out of touch you look? Ordinary Americans are struggling to pay their rent and buy groceries, and you're attending $35,000 parties in custom designer gowns while attacking the very people who paid for the event." AOC tried to claim she was invited to make a statement, but Trump cut her off. "You made a statement, all right," he said. "You made the statement that you are a complete hypocrite." He then pulled out even more evidence regarding her lifestyle. "Let's talk about how you actually live on a daily basis, Alexandria. Because the American people deserve to know the truth." He displayed photos and financial records on the screens. "You live in a luxury apartment in the Navy Yard district of Washington, D.C., where the rent is $2,700 every month. That is over $32,000 a year just for your housing. You wear Manolo Blahnik shoes that cost $580 a pair. You were seen in a designer outfit worth $3,400 for a magazine shoot. You drive a Tesla that costs at least $50,000, and your taxpayer-funded salary is $174,000 a year." Trump turned back to the audience. "She earns $174,000 a year and has actually complained that it isn't enough to live on," he said. "The median household income in this country is about $70,000. She earns more than double that and says she's struggling." He pointed his finger at her again. "You want to lecture people about inequality and about the rich not paying their share. Yet you live in a luxury building, drive a high-end electric car, wear designer shoes, and attend the most elite parties in the world." Trump walked toward her podium. "I'm a wealthy man, and I've never tried to hide it," he said. "I built skyscrapers, I created an empire, and I earned my billions through hard work and business. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. But you spend your time attacking the wealthy while living exactly like they do. You preach about the struggle of the working class while sipping champagne with the elite. That isn't democratic socialism. That is pure champagne socialism." He then revealed his next piece of information. "And let's talk about your background, because you've built your entire political identity on being a girl from the Bronx. You say it in almost every speech and every video." Trump had a map projected on the screens. "You aren't actually from the Bronx, Alexandria. You grew up in Yorktown Heights in Westchester County, which is one of the wealthiest areas in the entire country. Photos of her childhood home appeared on the screen. It was a nice suburban house in a beautiful neighborhood with excellent schools. The median home value there is around $450,000. Your father was a professional architect who earned a very good living. You went to an expensive university that costs $60,000 a year. Your family was comfortable, upper middle class. He looked at her with mock sympathy. There is absolutely nothing wrong with coming from a good family, he said, but you pretend you're a product of the working class struggle because it's a better story for your brand. You manufactured this persona because it plays well in politics. But the reality is that it's a total fraud. AOC tried to claim her family moved when she was young, but Trump kept going. You grew up in wealthy Westchester. You went to elite schools, and your family had money, he said. You aren't working class. You're just very good at marketing a specific brand. His final assault in this round was particularly sharp. You bartended for a short time after you finished college, just like a lot of young people do, he said. It is honest work, and there's no shame in it. But you act like you were barely surviving on the edge of poverty. You had a degree from a top-tier university. You chose to work at a bar while you figured out your next career move. That isn't a struggle. That is a position of immense privilege. He spread his arms wide to the audience. So, let's summarize what we've learned, he said. You go to $35,000 parties in dresses that attack the rich. You live in a luxury apartment and drive a $50,000 car. You wear $600 shoes and complain that $174,000 isn't enough to live on. And you lie about where you're from to look more authentic. You aren't representing the working people. You're just pretending to be one of them while living like the elite you claim to despise. His final word was delivered with total contempt. That isn't real, Alexandria. That is a curated brand, and it is a total fraud. $35,000 for a party, $600 for shoes, and you're still complaining. If people see the hypocrisy, they should let it be known. Trump then grabbed another folder, this one with photos attached to the front cover. Now, let's talk about the actual reality of socialism, he said. The real-world version, not the version you talk about on Instagram. Let's look at the countries that have actually tried to implement your favorite ideas. He pulled out photos that were so graphic, some people in the room had to look away. Socialism is the system where you eventually start eating the animals from the zoo and calling it equality, he said. Trump had horrific images from Venezuela projected on the massive screens. You could see empty grocery stores, people digging through piles of garbage for food, and protesters being brutally beaten by the police. This was once the wealthiest nation in all of South America, Trump reminded everyone. They had oil, they had resources, they had everything. And then they tried socialism. They tried the exact same democratic socialism that you are promoting here. He showed more photos of the devastation. These are people being forced to eat zoo animals because there is no food in the stores. These are supermarkets with absolutely nothing on the shelves. This is what your ideology did to a once prosperous nation. AOC tried to interrupt by claiming Venezuela's problems were caused by other factors, but Trump shouted over her. Their problems were caused by socialism, he boomed. They nationalized their industries. They seized wealth from the successful. And they promised everyone free everything. Does that sound familiar to you? He displayed the actual economic data from the country. Inflation at 1,000,000%. A GDP that collapsed by 75%. A poverty rate of 96%. And 7 million people fleeing the country as refugees. Trump then pulled out a set of printed tweets. "And do you know what you said about this country? Let me read your own words back to you." He displayed AOC's old social media posts praising the policies of the Venezuelan government. "You praised their programs and said they were doing great things for the workers," he noted. That was right before the people were forced to start eating the animals in the zoo. The audience booed loudly at the revelation. Trump moved on to his next examples. "Look at Cuba, where people risk their lives on homemade rafts to escape your socialist paradise," he said. "They would rather face sharks and drowning than stay in a system like yours." Why is that? Because socialism never works. The USSR collapsed, and millions of people starved. North Korea is a dark wasteland where people are dying of hunger. But hey, at least everyone is equally miserable, right? Even China had to adopt capitalist principles just to survive. He turned to face her directly. "Name one single socialist country that has ever been a long-term success," he challenged. "Just one example of it actually working." AOC fumbled and tried to mention Nordic countries, but Trump cut her off instantly. "The Prime Minister of Denmark has explicitly said they are not a socialist country," he reminded her. "They are a capitalist nation with a strong social safety net. They actually have lower corporate tax rates than we do. They aren't socialist." Trump began pacing the stage again, his voice rising in power. "Every time socialism fails, you people say it wasn't real socialism. It's only real socialism if it works, but the problem is that it never actually works." He pulled up a final comparison on the screens. Capitalism made America the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. It has lifted billions of people out of poverty all over the globe. It created innovation, prosperity, and freedom. Socialism creates zoo animal dinners, empty shelves, and oppression. Trump walked toward her podium again. "You want the American people to abandon the system that works for a system that has failed every single time it's been tried? You want us to become the next Venezuela?" He shook his head in disgust. "I've traveled all over this world and built massive projects in dozens of countries," he said. "I've seen capitalism work, and I've seen socialism destroy lives. And you've never even managed a small business, yet you think you can redesign the entire country based on theories that have killed millions." His final assessment was delivered with genuine anger. "Socialism is for people who don't understand basic economics and don't care about real-world results. It is a fairy tale for children, and you are trying to destroy this country with it. Venezuela eating zoo animals and Cuba fleeing on rafts. That is what she wants for America. If you love capitalism, let the world know." Trump then reached for a folder marked Education in large letters. "Let's talk about this famous economics degree you're always mentioning," he said. "You love to call yourself an expert on the subject." He pulled out the details of her academic record. Boston University, class of 2011. Your parents paid $250,000 for that education. Let's see what you actually learned for all that money. He called it a $250,000 education that taught her everything except how an economy actually works. Trump had a video clip queued up on the screens. "This is from an interview you did in July of 2018, he said. "Let's take a look." The clip showed AOC saying that unemployment was only low because everyone was working 2 jobs and put in 80 hours a week. Trump paused the video and turned to the audience. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "She thinks unemployment is low because people have 2 jobs. Does that make any sense to anyone with a brain?" He looked at different sections of the crowd. If one person has 2 jobs, are they counted as 2 employed people, or just one person with 2 jobs? The audience shouted back the correct answer in unison. "Exactly," Trump said. Unemployment is a measure of the percentage of people who don't have a job at all. If you have two jobs, you are counted exactly once as an employed person. He turned back to his opponent. You have a degree in economics from a school that costs $60,000 a year, and you don't even understand the most basic definition of how unemployment is calculated. AOC tried to claim she was making a broader point, but Trump was on a roll. Your broader point is useless if your basic facts are mathematically impossible, he countered. You made a statement that is fundamentally wrong, and you call yourself an expert. Let's test your knowledge right now, Alexandria, since you're so educated. He pulled out a list of quiz questions. How is the unemployment rate actually calculated? He asked. AOC started to give a careful textbook answer. Correct, Trump said. So if someone has two jobs, they are counted once, which means your viral video was a total lie. He moved to the next question. Tax incentives. Are they a government expenditure or just money the government chooses not to collect? AOC hesitated, knowing he was bringing it back to the Amazon deal. They are money not collected, which means they aren't money you can spend on other things, Trump said, which is why your whole argument about Amazon was completely stupid. He pulled out even more examples of her economic errors. You've claimed we can just print unlimited money to pay for your programs, which causes massive inflation. You've claimed billionaires shouldn't exist, even though they employ millions of people. You've claimed unemployment comes from people working too hard. That isn't how the world works. He walked around his podium. After you finished your expensive schooling, you worked at a bar. There is nothing wrong with that. It is honest work. But you have never managed a business, you've never met a payroll, you've never paid business taxes, and you've never created a single job. Trump pointed his finger at her. You mixed cocktails, Alexandria. That is your total business experience. And now you want to be the architect of the American economy? He shook his head in exaggerated disbelief. I've employed over 22,000 people and dealt with taxes, regulations, unions, and contracts for 50 years. I've actually done the work. You've just memorized a few radical textbooks and mixed some drinks. Those are not the same thing. His final assessment was devastating. You have a $250,000 education, but you don't understand the first thing about inflation, taxes, or business. You've never run anything in your life, and you want to be in charge of a $25 trillion economy. That isn't confidence. That is pure delusion. An economics degree without any economic knowledge. Mixing drinks isn't creating jobs. If you see the problem, let it be known. Trump then grabbed his final folder before the conclusion of the debate. He held it up, and it was noticeably thin. Let's take a look at your actual record in Congress, he said. Let's see what you've actually accomplished in 3 years. He opened the folder dramatically to reveal that it was completely empty. An empty folder for an empty legislative record, he joked. Perfect. You've been in office for 3 years, Alexandria. Let's see the results. He pretended to read from the blank pages. Major legislation passed. 0. Bills signed into law. 0. Jobs created. Negative 25,000. Problem solved? None. Committee leadership? None. He looked up at her. But you do have 13 million Twitter followers, so I guess you've been busy with that. The audience laughed and cheered. Trump then pulled out the actual public records. The Green New Deal was your signature project, your big idea for the world. Let's see how it did when it actually came up for a vote. He displayed the final tally on the screen, 0 to 57. Not a single person voted for it. Your own party wouldn't even support your biggest idea because they knew it was insane. He showed more of her failed initiatives. You killed the Amazon deal and cost your city 25,000 jobs. You've opposed every attempt at immigration reform without offering a single workable solution. You've complained about health care, but proposed nothing that could actually pass. You've talked about climate change, but your only plan was a total disaster. Trump walked toward the center of the stage. You've been a member of Congress for 3 years, and you haven't passed one significant piece of law. You haven't created any jobs or solved any problems for your constituents. What have you actually been doing with your time? AOC tried to claim she had raised awareness for important issues. Awareness? Trump shouted back. That isn't governing. That's just tweeting. Congratulations, you're a social media influencer with a government paycheck. He pointed at her accusingly. You aren't a legislator. You're just someone who's good at Instagram and TikTok and making viral videos. But when it comes to the hard work of actually governing and solving problems, you've done absolutely nothing. Trump then pulled out his final comparison. I built Trump Tower. I built golf courses and hotels all over the world. I've employed thousands of people and generated billions in economic activity. I created real, tangible things that you can see and touch. What have you built? A large Twitter following. That is your only accomplishment in life. Social media likes. He then revealed his final piece of evidence. Do you remember your grandmother in Puerto Rico, whose home was damaged by the hurricane? He asked. Trump showed her tweets about her grandmother's suffering. You posted those photos to attack me and make a political point, he noted. You made it very public and very political. He then pulled out the records from a fundraiser. A group of conservatives actually raised $14,153 to help your grandmother fix her home. These were regular people who just wanted to help. Trump displayed the GoFundMe total on the screens. And do you know what you did? He asked. You rejected the money. Your office refused to take the funds. Because the money came from people who disagree with you politically. The audience booed loudly at the revelation. Your own grandmother was living in a damaged house, and you turned down $14,000 to help her because of your political brand, Trump said, his voice filled with genuine disgust. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You used your own family for political points, and then you refused to let people help her because it didn't fit your narrative. His final summary was devastating. 3 years in office, 0 legislation, 25,000 jobs lost, and you rejected help for your own family. But hey, you're great at taking selfies and posting on Instagram. That isn't a leader. That's just a fraud. America deserves better than influencer politics and failed socialist theories. If you want real leaders, let the world know. The moderator tried to move to closing statements, but Trump held up his hand. I want to make one thing very clear before we finish, he said, because the American people need to understand the choice they are facing. He walked to the center of the stage, leaving his folders behind as a pile of evidence. Alexandria wants to bring socialism to this country. I have spent my life building things under the capitalist system. Let's look at the results. He turned to face her directly. I started with a loan and built a multi-billion-dollar empire. I constructed iconic towers in Manhattan, world-class hotels in Chicago and Las Vegas, and golf courses all over the globe. I've employed over 22,000 people and generated billions in taxes and wealth. That is what capitalism looks like. It is about creating value, building things, and growing the economy. He turned back to his opponent. You've been in Congress for 3 years. You've created 0 jobs. Actually, you destroyed 25,000 of them. You've passed 0 laws. Your only plan costs $93 trillion and is physically impossible. That is what socialism looks like. It is about destroying instead of building, taking instead of creating, and tweeting instead of governing. He went through a final point-by-point comparison. I created jobs, you killed them. I built real projects. You proposed a $93 trillion fantasy. I created wealth. You attack it while living in luxury. I warned that socialism fails. You praised it right before the people in Venezuela were forced to eat zoo animals. I understand business from experience. You have a degree you don't even understand. I have tangible results. You have Twitter followers and excuses. Trump's voice became even more forceful. Capitalism built this nation into the wealthiest and most powerful in history. Socialism turned Venezuela into a place where people eat zoo animals for dinner. Capitalism has lifted billions out of poverty. Socialism creates poverty wherever it goes. Capitalism gave us innovation, cars, planes, and computers. Socialism gave us bread lines and empty shelves. Capitalism is about freedom and choice. Socialism is about government control and failure. It fails every single time it's tried. Trump walked toward her one last time. You are a bartender with a degree you don't comprehend, who destroyed 25,000 jobs and called it a win. You want to spend $93 trillion we don't have. You live like the elite while attacking them. You have zero accomplishments in office, and you rejected help for your own grandmother for a political stunt. And you think you should be in charge of the American economy? You want to replace the system that made us great with a system that makes people eat animals from the zoo. His voice rose to a final crescendo. This country has a clear choice to make. We can stick with capitalism, free markets, and opportunity, or we can try socialism, government failure, and poverty. I know which one I choose. I built an empire and made this country richer. She wants to destroy what works and replace it with a fairy tale that always ends in disaster. Don't let her. The future is what we build together, and you can't build anything under a socialist system. The audience erupted into a standing ovation that lasted for over 5 minutes. The chanting of his name and slogans about capitalism were deafening. AOC sat at her podium, completely unable to respond to the systematic destruction of her arguments. Every point he made was backed by documented evidence, her own words, and historical reality. She couldn't deny the jobs she lost or explain the cost of her plans. She couldn't defend her luxury lifestyle or name a single successful socialist nation. She could only watch as her political persona collapsed under the weight of the facts. The video of the debate exploded across every social media platform within hours, reaching nearly 100 million views in a single day. The phrase bartender economics became an instant meme and a trending topic. The details of the Amazon deal and the $726,000 cost per household were shared millions of times. The photos of her at the Met Gala, juxtaposed with her slogans, became the defining image of political hypocrisy. Every major conservative voice in the media amplified the impact of the debate, breaking down his arguments and verifying his evidence for a national audience. The debate even penetrated into liberal circles, where people were forced to confront the specific numbers and facts he had presented. Young voters who had previously been drawn to her brand of socialism started to question what they had been told. Social media was filled with videos of people doing their own research and realizing the truth about her record and her plans. Polling showed a dramatic shift in attitudes toward socialism among younger generations after they watched the debate. The specific details of the lost Amazon jobs had a massive impact on the residents of New York who had been affected. Even members of her own party began to distance themselves from her more radical ideas, realizing they were politically toxic. The Green New Deal became a punchline that made any serious discussion of climate policy impossible. Her lifestyle and background were constantly mocked, and her lack of legislative results became a major vulnerability. The comparison to the collapse of Venezuela became a powerful rallying cry against her ideology. 3 months later, a moderate challenger announced a primary campaign against her, using the clips from the debate as his main message. The fundraiser for the challenger raised millions in just 1 week, and polling showed her support in her own district was collapsing. Even the leadership of her party refused to defend her in public. She had been exposed as an influencer who couldn't govern, and the political world treated her accordingly. 1 year later, her influence in politics had almost completely vanished. Her signature plans were dead and her brand was toxic. Trump had made his case through concrete evidence and real-world results, and the American people had listened. He had proven that capitalism creates wealth, while socialism only creates poverty. He had built an empire, while she had only built a Twitter following. The choice between reality and fantasy had been made clear. America became the wealthiest nation on earth because we allowed people to build and create, not because of failed socialist theories. That is a lesson that will be remembered for a long time. If you believe that capitalism is the better system for this country, share the story and let the world know. Because at the end of the day, jobs are always better than zoo animals for dinner. Trump proved with evidence why our system is the most successful in history and why we must protect it from those who want to destroy it. It isn't about political theory. It's about the results that people can see in their own lives every single day. Capitalism wins because it actually works. Socialism fails because it always ignores the reality of human nature and economics. The debate was a turning point for the country, and the impact will be felt for generations.